Hello my fellow T-Virus victims, welcome to the channel. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. And we're going to be talking about the Resident Evil Requiem showcase trailer and the gameplay and everything talked about and shown by Nakanishi and his team as we head towards the final weeks before the release of Resident Evil Requiem. Yeah, we haven't got that long to wait, to be honest. It's coming out fairly soon. I don't think there's going to be a playable demo. I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. I'm pissed off at that, and a lot of people are pissed off at that. It is what it is, and I do have faith in Nakanishi and his team in bringing us a proper, sort of survival horror and survival horror action title that I think we're going to get engrossed in and we're going to enjoy. And hopefully, fingers crossed, that the game will be just as iconic and just as memorable as various Resident Evil titles, including the remake of Resident Evil 1, the original Resident Evil 2, the original Nemesis, Resident Evil 7 for what it did, and how good and how enjoyable that game was as a straight survival horror title. And also Revelations 1, which he was director of, as well as RE7, and he did a good job with that game. I still play that to this day, and I still enjoy it just as much as when I played it the first time. So I have faith, like I've said previously, in Nakanishi as director. But hopefully this game, it's his magnum opus. That's what I'm hoping. Hopefully it's not just a reason for Capcom to bring out another Resident Evil title. I don't think Nakanishi is that sort of creator or auteur. I think that he really does take pride in the games he directs from previous, experience. And when I say not just bringing out another Resident Evil title, I mean just sort of shitting out a Resident Evil title in the same vein as an Assassin's Creed or, a Far Cry. That's what I mean, or a Call of Duty. But as I said previously, I have faith in Nakanishi. I don't think he's that sort of director, because the games that he has directed, they've always had a lot of love put into them, definitely. I'm not saying that other games in this series haven't had love and attention sort of poured into them, but you can see the difference in quality, or at least I can, when I've played Village and Resident Evil 6 compared to Revelations 1 or Resident Evil 7. There's a massive difference in terms of quality, in terms of the storytelling or the horror or how things are handled. And I think that Nakanishi gets that. He's the first director after Shinji Mikami to helm the Resident Evil series that I generally sort of clicked with, when I was playing Resident Evil 7 or I was playing Revelations 1. So I've got a lot of faith. And this game does look good, but there's also a lot that we haven't seen, and which is good because we haven't been spoiled, but at the same time, it could go either way. And I will touch upon these points and explain why I'm overall not worried, but there is a slight bit of doubt, a little bit of doubt. So we will go over it and I'll explain myself as we go through the showcase. So let's talk about that Capcom Resident Evil Requiem showcase that was shown last night. Unfortunately, it was quite late where I am in the UK when I saw it, when I watched it. But I did upload the trailer to the channel so you guys could at least be prepared for what I'm going to go into and talk about, or you saw the trailer elsewhere, and you'll understand what I'm talking about when we go through this all. So I guess the first thing we need to start with is Leon Kennedy. We need to talk about Leon Kennedy and how fucking badass he is in this game. He has reached peak Kennedy. Let's just say that he is a zombie killing, head stomping DSO agent at this point. Rescuing the president's daughter, small potatoes. Dealing with a cult, a village cult, with things popping out their head. Child's play. He's pretty much the T-1000, a Terminator in this game. He's taking zombies out left, right, and centre. He's, when he slices a zombie in half with its own chainsaw, he just picks it up and slices it in half. I don't care who you are. I'm old school survival horror, Resident Evil, okay, grew up on that, but I let out a small cheer, and I'm pretty sure any fan of Resident Evil is going to let out sort of a small cheer as well, because it was awesome to see, to see him in action in this game, in that trailer. And the great thing about it is it makes more sense compared to like Resident Evil 6 where everybody was OP and it was all just over the top action. In this, I can see Leon having gone through the events of Resident Evil 2, being a rookie cop, getting shot, trying to protect everybody, to Resident Evil 4, going to protect the President's daughter, rescue the President's daughter, and then facing off against enemies that he hadn't encountered before, and dealing with that situation, to now to Requiem, where he has gone through all this stuff, including the CG films as well. That's another thing. The CG films play a big part in his characterization up until this point. And if you've watched Damnation, if you've watched Vendetta, Death Island, then you will see peak Leon Kennedy. I would say that Degeneration, because I watched them recently, I watched through them again recently, Degeneration was still him being almost like a rookie DSO agent, yeah, but still a badass, still capable, still just on point. But having seen his progression through the CG films, from Resident Evil 2 and 4, and then the CG films as well, it's a culmination of all that experience, all that training, and all those events taking a toll on him. And I think seeing him in this game, and how efficient he is at dispatching BOWs, it was cool to see. It was a cool thing to see. I still think that the game still gave off a sense of survival horror to an extent. It's quite cool in the way that it toes the line, I'll say that. Yeah, he's extremely competent. He does dispatch zombies quite easily, quite quickly, quite proficiently. But you can still see that there's going to be some vulnerable moments for Leon, as a character, definitely. I mean, it's been proven that he's infected, he's infected, and it seems to me like, whereas Leon in Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4 and the CG films was sort of a very selfless person, like a very selfless hero, he tries to protect everybody, even in, I'm trying to think, which one was it, Vendetta, he's sat at the bar, he's on vacation, he's having a drink, he's super drunk, Chris comes up with Rebecca, and at first he's like, it's not my fight, I just want to enjoy my vacation, stop bothering me. But even then, after him and Chris have a little back and forth, and Rebecca says her piece, even then he decides, alright, I'm going to help you guys. He is a selfless person, he's a selfless character. He's pretty much like, the Resident Evil golden boy, essentially. And he is that, that macho hero that everybody depends on, and he gets shit done. But in this game, in this story, he's infected with a new virus, and unlike the Plagas, it seems like he hasn't got like a lot of time. And this time he's trying to save himself, as well as, save the world and save Grace, and sort of, he still has that selfless personality, but he's also being a little bit selfish. And when I mean selfish, I guess I'm comparing him to Resident Evil 4 Leon, where even though he was infected with the Plaga, he was always positive and trying to make sure that Ashley, was saved, and the Plaga was removed from her before he succumbed to it. With obviously a little bit of help from Ada as well. But yeah, but in this, he's doing his job, and he's being the hero, but at the same time, he is rushing to try and find a cure for himself, which I think is great. I think that's a great addition to his character, to show us that he is human and that he doesn't want to die. He doesn't want to be infected, so he is rushing. He's trying, to find this cure while doing his job, and I think that's going to lead to some great moments with him. I hope, anyway. Maybe I'm misreading that, but that's what I felt like when he's skimming through all the sort of information and stuff on Elpis. It looks like he's kind of trying to find out as much as he can, because he's infected. That's the vibe I got from the trailer anyway. That's kind of what I took away from the trailer. I think that they're gonna add a lot more characterization to him, and just build upon the sort of character he is already, and I think that's great. He's not going to be as one-dimensional as he was in Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil Damnation. There's going to be more layers added to his character, and I think he's going to be a lot more relatable. Definitely not just the gung-ho hero who's just proficient at everything, like combat, hand to hand, firearms. I think Yeah, and I think that's where the survival horror aspect in terms of Leon comes into play, and having him at points be helpless, because if they're gonna actually ride this infected Leon throughout the whole game and weave it into the plot, then he is gonna have moments where, you know, he's succumbing to the virus, maybe getting weaker. Grace has to help him. I mean, this is me just spitballing, but yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. I think there's going to be points where she's going to need to help him because, you know, he's going to be succumbing to the virus. But Leon's tough. That's the thing. So yeah, that's what I hope for anyway. I think he's going to be a lot more relatable and a lot more humanized, even though, you know, he's quite a human character in the other games. But yeah, he's going to be a lot more humanized in this game. You know, less of the action hero, more of a relatable kind of hero. So a bit like Resident Evil 2. That's what I will say. Like, he was quite relatable in Resident Evil 2, and then kind of became the gung-ho action hero. And then now, you know, we're gonna add more layers to him and have this older, just more cynical Leon. You know, Leon Kennedy. A bit like we get to see in Vendetta. We get to see a little bit of that in Vendetta. Where he's just getting fed up with it all. And I don't blame him. But yeah, so it's interesting. There's a whole lot of stuff to take away from, you know, from the Leon segments, definitely. And then, of course, the true survival horror segments of the game are going to be Grace Ashcroft segments. And so we are going to have a lack of ammo, you know, stalker enemies, her sneaking, sort of trying to sneak past zombies and other BOWs, other enemies. There's one part in the trailer, I'm getting ahead of myself, where she has to sneak through a dining hall. It's very reminiscent of the Spencer Mansion dining hall, and zombies are sort of coming out from under the table, and they're like waking up, you know, or reanimating while they're sitting in the chair trying to grab at her, and I thought that was amazing. Like, I can't wait to play that bit. And I also think it was inspired a little bit by Welcome to Raccoon City. There's a scene where Chris is trying to avoid the zombies in the dining room, in the Spencer Mansion dining room. So I think they've borrowed a little bit of that from Welcome to Raccoon City, and it's a great moment, to be honest. It's one of the best moments of that film. I actually raved about it in my review of Welcome to Raccoon City. I said it's actually one of the... I wish that the film was literally this, you know, throughout the whole thing. But yeah, so we get to see that, and I thought that was just amazing. I was like, this is a great use of you know, sort of current gen hardware, and kind of taking that spin in the Resident Evil 2 original and Resident Evil 2 remake of being quiet and trying to avoid lickers, you know, who can't actually see you but they can hear. They can hear you. They can hear the smallest thing. So you have to sneak past them. And in the remake, when Mr. X is on your ass and you're trying to sneak past the licker, it's tense. Like, yeah, it gets your anxiety going, definitely. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. I want to go back to the Leon sort of gameplay. So Nakanishi said that Grace's parts are more similar to Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 7, and Leon's parts are inspired directly from Resident Evil 4. Like, that's the biggest inspiration. So Leon's parts are going to be sort of Resident Evil 4, but on steroids. And when you watch the trailer, if you've seen the trailer already, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's Resident Evil 4, but he just goes in. Like, there's a moment where a zombie comes after him, and he literally swivels round it, points a gun to the back of its head, and blows its head off. And it's that sort of stuff. Almost like in Resident Evil 4 remake, he holds if a villager gets too close to him, he actually holds the gun like John Wick, and I love that. Like, it showed a lot more of how trained he was, you know, as a DSO agent. And I think in this, it's like that, but times 10. But there seems to be a way that Nakanishi and his team have handled the violence, the gore, and how well trained Leon is. There's a certain way that they've handled it that works, whereas Resident Evil 6 just didn't handle it very well. And in Resident Evil Village, you know, there's too much crazy shit going on, like Heisenberg being like basically an ex-mutant, you know, like Magneto controlling metal, and it was just like, what the hell. But in this, when Leon sticks his hatchet into a zombie's neck and then swivels round and chops its head off, it looks cool. It's overly stylized, At the same time, it's so brutal and vicious that it just works. I can get behind that a lot more than sort of anything, in Resident Evil 6, the way characters were acting in Resident Evil 6, Chris jumping onto a BOW and pulling the, whatever the fucking thing was stuck in its back, pulling that out, and it was just ridiculous. I was like, what is this? Is this like, Shadow of the Colossus? Like, is this anime? Like, it was just weird, right? Within sort of, this is going to sound silly, but it was weird to me within the realm of possibility within the series. Or in Resident Evil 5, Chris punching a boulder. Hey, even in Resident Evil Degeneration, the way that Leon, sort of wraps his legs around a liquor and then dodges it as it swipes for him, even that stuff was just silly, like, and over the top, to the point where it had me sort of scratching my head going, it looked weird. It was just weird. It was a weird scene. But in this, it never once kind of came across as being like overly goofy and silly. I'm sure we'll get moments of that. I mean, this is following sort of in the footsteps of Resident Evil 4, and Resident Evil 4 was brutal. It was violent, vicious, and he was an efficient, basically, killer. But at the same time, for all the goofiness, that was in that game, there was also some moments where I was like, damn, that was brutal, and I just got behind it. And it's a similar thing with this. So far, I feel like this is a little bit more restrained than Resident Evil 4. I don't know why. I know that there are some just wow moments, like, flippin' hell, did he actually do that? But yeah, I don't know. It's just the way they've handled it is really, really well. They've handled it really well, and this is like from a director that created Resident Evil 7, and it was very back to survival horror, like back to the roots. It was a very different game to the original Resident Evil, but in its own way, it still had its own identity. It was still pretty iconic and did some things different, and it kind of switched up the Resident Evil template that we were familiar with, but it never offended me. Unlike Resident Evil 6 or Resident Evil Village, they did not offend, like, I say offend me, it didn't offend me, but I just didn't gel with those games as much as like Resident Evil 7 or Revelations. Revelations has some ridiculous moments and some really goofy stuff. I mean, who remembers the Chris Redfield dummy and Veltro wanted to like confuse the BSAA and Jill and her partner? Like, yeah, that was weird. It didn't really go anywhere. But it was in that game. That's what I'm saying. There was some real silly moments, but yeah, I still absolutely love Revelations 1, and I do think that Requiem's going to have some fun. Definitely is going to have fun with it, with the horror elements and stuff, and with Leon. I mean, why not? At this point, like I said, he's an action hero. Like, he's more than efficient at dispatching a bioweapon or two. So I think they're going to have a lot of fun with it. But from what I saw, it was also fucking brutal. Let's just say that he was dispatching zombies like a pro at this point. So yeah, I think it's going to have some fun moments. It's going to have fun with it. It's going to have some silly moments, but it's also going to have some visceral, raw moments. And a lot of the stuff that we saw during the showcase, it was just raw. Like, there was moments where I was like, whoa. Like, when he roundhouse kicks a zombie, pins him to a cabinet, and then he just squashes his head under his foot. I thought that was vicious, man. I was like, I'm down for this. This looks fun, and that's the thing. You want to have fun with this game as well. Like, you want to be like impressed when Leon dispatches zombies. We can't have Resident Evil 2 Leon anymore. He's not a rookie cop anymore. This guy is like efficient at his job, and that's what's kept him alive for so long. So yeah, like, if we're gonna have this OP character, then let's have fun with it. Let's see some cool stuff. Let's see some cool moves that he pulls off, and that's what we get to see during this trailer. I also liked in the middle of the trailer where Nakanishi said, I didn't actually say Leon wasn't in the game. He reiterates that. If I remember right, it's true. He just kind of was trying to throw people off the scent. I can't remember the exact words that he said, but yeah, in this it was really funny, and the person interviewing him was like laughing, and he starts to laugh, and it was a great sort of light-hearted moment where he was like, yeah, I never actually said he wasn't in the game. Like, he's always been a part of Requiem. but because so many people were trying to spoil it and sort of ruin it, even though it might have been obvious to a lot of us and obvious to a lot of people out there, but it still, people kept trying to spoil it. I was like, let it just organically, come out. Like, it's gonna organically come out. They're not gonna they're not gonna leave you waiting sort of until the game's released, not knowing that Leon's in the game. He's in it quite prominently, so he's going to be in the next couple of trailers, and he was. So yeah, I loved that. That was a nice little light-hearted moment from Nakanishi, and that's what gives me confidence that he's the man for the job. He's the best director to have helming a Resident Evil title, and especially one with stakes this big. Definitely, like returning to Raccoon City, bringing in a new protagonist like Grace Ashcroft, who's Alyssa Ashcroft, an established character within the lore. That's her daughter. So, bringing a new virus into it with Elpis, and possibly kind of tying back to the T virus and maybe the G virus and the mold, and just stuff that he's created in Resident Evil 7, and it's tying back to Requiem, and bringing Leon back and having him like this more advanced sort of soldier, all this stuff I have faith that Nakanishi can pull off and can handle, and I think he's the best man for the job. So it was great to see a light-hearted sort of moment with him, because I like that. He's not super serious. He's not like, I hope you like it, and please like my game. No, he was confident, and that's what you want from a director. Confidence, you want that confidence. So yeah, he's definitely the best man for the job. Another revealing and interesting thing that Nakanishi says is that Leon will face off against the toughest BOWs that he's faced yet. He is post Resident Evil 6 Leon, so he's still incorporating Resident Evil 6 into the canon, but he said that Leon's segments and Leon's parts of the game are more influenced by Resident Evil 4, which is what we all want, right? So it's going to be like a mix of his character in 6 and a mix of his character in 4, and just a culmination of all that stuff. But he says, I hope that you'll look forward to finding out the hardship that Leon goes through. Essentially, he says the hardships that Leon goes through and how it takes a toll on him. So that's another kind of reveal as to Leon's going to go through some shit, and he's going to go through it big time, I think, in this game. Now, a lot of people were speculating that he's going to die. I don't think they're going to kill Leon off, okay? They didn't kill Chris Redfield off, and Leon's a more beloved character than Chris Redfield. They even had to bring Jill Valentine back in Death Island, because myself being a huge Jill fan, my favourite character in the series, as well as a ton of other people, they wanted more Jill. And after the remake of 3, they wanted more Jill. So they did that in Death Island. So I don't think that they're going to kill Leon off. I think it's going to get pretty close. It's going to get quite hairy, and he's going to go through some shit, definitely. I don't know, maybe he'll lose a limb or something like Ethan Winters. I don't know, but or lose an eye or whatever. But who knows? I'm speculating, but I don't think they're going to kill him off. No, I think he's going to be given a hero's send-off, definitely, and we're not going to get like a John Marston situation where he gets shot to shit, do you know what I mean, after he's been through all that stuff that he's been through. So, I think Leon's going to be fine. I don't think they're going to kill him. If they do kill him, that would surprise me, that would shock me, I'm not going to lie. That would be quite shocking, but I don't think it's going to happen. We'll have to see, though. I'm just speculating on my part. So we've fawned over Leon enough. Let's talk about the zombies in this game. That's another aspect of the game that I really liked. The zombies are now retaining some of their human traits. So what they were doing before they were zombified, before they were infected and turned. And it kind of harkens back to the Itchy Tasty memo from the original Resident Evil, where that scientist was losing his humanity, is losing his mind, and he was slowly turning, and the last words were, itchy tasty, right? But in this, it's like, rather than lose complete, like, brain activity, essentially, they still retain a lot of their human traits. So he said there's a custodian of the hospital and the custodian will still do tasks that she would do when she was human. But obviously, if Leon or Grace show up, she wants to essentially rip out their necks. But Nakanishi says that she'll be cleaning windows and I don't know, mopping the floor or doing whatever she did when she was human. But if she sees Leon or Grace or any other human being, she'll become violent. And then we get a scene of like a chef in a kitchen, and he's actually talking. So they're kind of incorporating the Brad Vickers from the RE3 remake type zombie into Requiem as well, because if anyone's familiar with the remake of 3, he actually says words. Brad Vickers says words in that game, and before Carlos shoots him. So it showed he was a little bit smarter than your average zombie and stuff. He still retained, or it's just because he turned recently that he still retains some humanity there, like that human part of his brain. There was still, you know, some cognitive stuff going on. And in this, if you've seen the previous trailers with the Doctor, you know, he says something, I can't remember to the extent of what he says, but yeah, Leon replies, you know, I need a second opinion. And in this trailer, we get to see this like chef zombie's massive hulking son of a bitch, and he says next like that, you know. And then as soon as Leon enters the kitchen, he's got his hatchet up and he runs for him. And it reminds me a lot of Resident Evil 4 when you first meet, you know, the first villager in the original, like Resident Evil 4. And in the remake as well. So that's cool. That's a callback. That's another callback. It's, you know, there's a lot of influences and a lot of callbacks, and I think that's great. But it's all done in a way that's seamless, and it's just like a nod, you know, to previous games. Like I said, there's the dining room that, you know, resembles the Spencer Mansion dining room. There's these smart zombies that are like the Brad Vickers zombie from Resident Evil 3 remake. And then with that intelligence, you have the zombies almost acting a little bit like the Los Illuminados from Resident Evil 4, and that first villager that you happen across. That's what this chef zombie reminded me of. So yeah, some great callbacks, and all done in a very tasteful way. Not just thrown in there slapdash and be like, do you remember this? Member berries, you know, it's not done in that way. So yeah. And then there's great new additions to like gameplay where a zombie's trying to switch off a light and then it stays off, and then he's trying to switch it back on, and he just keeps doing it. And because he's still sort of remembering what he did as a human, you can sneak past him. You know, as Leon, as Grace, you can sneak past this zombie. You don't actually have to engage this enemy in combat. It's little things like that. It's little touches, and just the way that they've meticulously added these little gameplay elements that actually are like big deals, you know, to us. Like, that's how you know it's been made with a lot of love and care. It's just little things like that. And yeah, we've been able to sneak past villagers in the RE4 remake, and sneak past lickers in Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 2 remake, but that's what I'm saying, it's just adding on top of that and just making it even more interesting, like as a gameplay loop, you know. And it's going to be interesting to see all the sort of different personalities and the different things that these zombies do that lead to you being able to sneak past them or alerting them and then having to take them on. And I mean, when you think about it, in the older Resident Evil titles, we had zombies, and they were zombies, right? They shuffled, they moaned, and you blew their heads off. Then we had the Crimson Heads. Yeah, they were a faster, more vicious, violent version of a zombie, but if you met like one Crimson Head, the other Crimson Head would do what that Crimson Head did. Cool, you know, just a basic instinct to rip the flesh off of Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine, you know. And then we had the villagers, and some of them had different personalities, but not to the same extent these zombies do. These zombies seem like they each have these individual personalities, and I think from a technical standpoint, I think that is incredible. Like in a Resident Evil game, I think that is moving things forward, you know, and advancing the series like in a big way. And we might have seen that in other films, you know, like, I don't know, 28 Weeks Later and Dawn of the Dead, the remake of Dawn of the Dead, and then Army of the Dead, and yeah, we've seen that in films, but we haven't really seen that in Resident Evil. So I'm really excited for that. Definitely, the new infected are a huge green tick in my book. Now, gameplay-wise, if we're talking about Leon Kennedy, we'll go to Leon and then we'll go to Grace. The two different styles of gameplay are that Leon, like we've said previously, he can just, he can dodge zombies, he can melee them with his hatchet. That's basically his hunting knife from Resident Evil 4, but yeah, just more gruesome now, so you can just chop their heads off and stuff. A similar kind of thing, like to normal melee weapons in Resident Evil games, where you can, block a chainsaw, but there's one addition to that where afterwards you have to sharpen the hatchet again, because it's kind of blunted the hatchet a little bit. And I think those little sort of elements added, which we've seen in other games, other sort of series, I think added to Resident Evil, it was a smart move, because it means you have to step back, sharpen up the axe again, so that you can then block the chainsaw if he does attack you again. But you'll sort of knock him away, and that stuns the zombie for like a while, or enemy that you're fighting, and then Leon can follow up with shooting him in the head, or shooting him in the kneecap, much like Resident Evil 4, and then suplexing him, or just roundhouse kicking him into a cabinet. And then you can then follow up by stomping on the zombie's head against the cabinet and squishing his head. And I thought all that stuff, just the way the flow of the combat, the flow of melee into gun combat was seamless. It was perfect. So yeah. And another thing as well, I did notice when seeing him sort of squash a zombie's head or blow its head off close range, is the blood. The blood looks so much better than any other Resident Evil game. It's just got that great sort of maroon colour. It's got that darker shade to it, but when it hits like a wall, it looks less dark. It's a bit more red, and it's just little touches like that. And another thing, the environment is a lot more interactive. Like, you're knocking zombies into things, you're smashing chairs into bits, or I don't know, smash when you kick them against a glass cabinet or something, it's smashing the glass. Like, there seems to be a lot more destruction to the environment, and a lot more interactivity with the environment. I don't think it's going to be like control levels of interactivity with the environment, like just blowing the fuck out of out of a room, but from what I saw, it was just the right amount. So yeah, I think that's cool. And then, in almost like a massive nod to games like Dead Rising, Leon picks up the chainsaw from said zombie after he's killed him, and just slices another zombie in half. And that was another seamless moment of gameplay. And I think that it's great that now there's just more options to kill these enemies, like kill these bioweapons and kill these zombies. I think, yeah, just the combat was leaving me very impressed. It was leaving me very impressed. So it just looked like a ton of fun. There is a specific move that does actually borrow quite heavily from Resident Evil 6, and that is the hip shoot that Leon could do in that game. He can hip shoot in this game, but then he can follow up with an extra melee attack. So yeah, like I said, he's incorporating a lot of stuff, even from games like Resident Evil 6, the cool stuff from Resident Evil 6, and he's putting it into this game. But you're not going to be able to like do fucking roly-polies out of the way for no apparent reason, because there was no real reason to pulling off those moves in Resident Evil 6. It was just, it was just there to look cool and be overly stylish. But like I said, in that game, it was deftly done, and it was just slapdash, throw it in there, it looks cool, with no real reasoning as to why you would, sort of roll dodge out of the way. I never used it. I just stood and shot them and then did some melee kills like in RE4. So yeah, but in this, there's a purpose to it. So again, like it was impressive. So with Grace's gameplay, it's the complete opposite. She has to sneak more. She has to navigate more in closed spaces. The enemies are a little bit more hulking. If we're talking about the thing that stalks her, which might be Alyssa, it might not be. I think it's Alyssa, but yeah, a mutated Alyssa. But it stalks her, and then obviously there's like these tiny corridors that it's chasing her through. She has to sneak past it, but she does get her hands on a weapon, and that is the the Magnum in the game. It's this massive Magnum, and it can actually sort of shoot through a zombie into another zombie, and it's actually called the Requiem. The gun's actually named the Requiem. So yeah, that was awesome. Like seeing her hold this hand cannon, this bear stopper. If I'm being honest, this thing could probably blow a T-Rex's leg off. It's so fucking huge and so powerful. But seeing her shoot through 2 zombies at once, yeah, that was awesome. And Leon, there's moments where you see Leon, I believe, holding the gun as well. So yeah, there's one thing I will say. It does seem like they both get to travel through the same areas, but I'm guessing that it's gonna switch it up quite heavily. So it'll be like Code Veronica when you go back to Rockfort Island as Chris after Claire's been there, and things are different. Like the island's sort of falling apart. It's after the self-destruct was activated and just blew up the islands. Well, parts of the island. So yeah, I think that's gonna kind of be a similar scenario with this game, where you go through it as Grace and then you're going through it as Leon, but different things are happening and the environment's changed a little bit. I hope anyway, because otherwise we'd get like a DMC4, like a Devil May Cry 4 situation, and I really don't think, for the amount of time this game's been in production, that's going to be the case. So yeah, and I don't think it's going to feel too samey just because different things are going to happen. I mean, we had it in Resident Evil 2 where we play as Leon or we play as Claire, but sort of different things happen. If you play the scenario A, it's that experience, and then you play through scenario B, there's different things that happen and it's a different experience. So I think similar type of thing with this, and at this point I'd say that's a Resident Evil staple, going through the game as a different character with slightly different things happening, and yeah, different cutscenes playing out and different interactions with other characters and NPCs. Now for the controversial part of this video, in my opinions. The collecting infected blood in syringes parts of the game, and then injecting it, sort of sneaking up behind a zombie and injecting it into a zombie, and they blow up like the vampires in Blade, when Blade hits him with the serum that Whistler and him made. I like the inspiration from Blade. I think that's cool, but at the same time I just think it was a little too OTT. Like, it was a little bit too much. I think just seeing a zombie explode, it's just red mist from injecting it, I just think it was a bit silly. I get what they're going with. It's a new way of crafting. It's finding something new when you're crafting stuff, right? And then you can craft these syringes and, I don't know, like, use whatever chemicals you have on you or Grace's blood somehow, and then you can create this, like, this serum that just explodes zombies. I get it. It's a cool concept. It's a cool idea. I'm pretty sure when the game comes out and I get to play those particular parts, and I get to do that stuff, I'll probably find it fun. But I still prefer, like, Chris just shoving a flash grenade in a zombie's mouth, running away, aiming at his head and blowing his head off. I like that. Yeah, I prefer that over just injecting a zombie in the back of the neck and it just blowing up. Like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It just wasn't as cool. Having said that, I do think that it's a clever idea, and I think it's kind of a cool concept. So it's just going to come down to when we actually get to play the game, and and are involved in it, I might change my opinion on it. Like, it's not like I hate it. I don't hate it. I don't like fully dislike it. I just think compared to like the other, get out of danger items from previous games, like the flash grenade, the taser, or whatever, Leon's knife, I think that it just didn't impress me as much as that. It wasn't as cool as those things, but I still think the concept's unique and clever, and Nakanishi is good for that sort of stuff. He tries to evolve the gameplay and the series in some way, and I don't think it's the worst thing. I just wasn't fully sold on that, definitely. And there's a lot of people that kind of felt similar as well, and there's people that really liked it. But I think the whole concept of actually like picking up the blood from an infected and then mixing it and crafting it, and then it turns into a weapon, it's kind of cool. So we'll have to see. Although I will say I did chuckle when After she blown the zombie up, Grace says, "Yeah, that's too effective." I thought that was cool. They always have those one-liners in Resident Evil games, and that was a great one. Much like Leon's, "I need a second opinion." I thought that was a great one. I think this game's gonna have some class one-liners. So yeah, we'll just have to see. Right, Nakanishi said that it's leaning more towards like Resident Evil 2 in terms of like that sort of concept, So yeah, we'll just have to see how they handle that. Now, before we move any further, I'd like to say that ink ribbons are making a return in this game for, I believe, harder difficulties, much like other Resident Evil or newer Resident Evil games. But Leon, they didn't mention the ink ribbons during Leon's segments, so I don't know if that's just going to be autosave, and then Grace is like the harder version kind of the game, of parts of the game, and then Leon's hard in a different way where it's just more tougher enemies and just more combat. And maybe, I don't know, maybe they couldn't actually incorporate the ink ribbons into his gameplay segments because of the way that, the structure of gameplay during his segments. Maybe it was just a bit difficult, because if he's literally going from like point A to B and just taking out bioweapons, then yeah, stopping to save your game on a typewriter, unlike Grace's segments, is maybe it felt a bit out of place, maybe it's a bit weird, I don't know. But they didn't actually mention ink ribbons in respect to Leon's segments, just Grace's. But having said that, I thought that at one point I thought Grace would be first person and third person, and then Leon was just third person, but they actually show you first person and third person during Leon's gameplay segments. So yeah, we're definitely getting first person and third person for both characters, and maybe the ink ribbons will make it into Leon's segments. If not, I'm guessing it's kind of a Doom Eternal situation where it's just like a fast moving, fast paced gameplay loop, and they just didn't have it just didn't fit his segments to have him stop off and save his game. That's what I'm thinking anyway. But with Grace, because it's slower and she's sneaking about more and it's a bit more old school survival horror, yeah, she can stop at a typewriter and save a game. But again, that's for harder difficulties. On easier difficulties, it's going to be like any newer Resident Evil title where it's auto saves. And touching upon that, there's multiple difficulty modes. So you have casual, standard, which is modern, and then standard classic. So old school Resident Evil vibes with that one. So yeah, we get 3 difficulties for now, but I'm guessing we'll get something akin to Madhouse difficulty, and Ethan Must Die difficulty. There is also a wealth of options, and one of those is you can use aim assist as well to sort of take zombies down easier. So essentially kind of like the older Resident Evil games where it would lock onto a zombie and then you could shoot them. It's a similar thing, so they're bringing that back. But I don't know if I'm going to use that. I think I might be sort of playing on medium difficulty and not using the aim assist. I don't think I need it, or at least you'll probably have the options to lower or raise it so it can, it's a bit like Max Payne 3 where it can lock on like hard, or you can lock on soft to the target. So, but it's just nice that Capcom and Nakanishi and his team have added those options in there, and we've got a lot more options and ways to enjoy the game. But yeah, watching the showcase again, or particular parts of the showcase again, they do say that the ink ribbons are used in Grace's segments of the game, so I don't think Leon's gonna be getting ink ribbons, which is a shame. But hey, I can see why they're doing it. It would ruin the gameplay loop of Leon's parts, so I understand it. And then we have like a lot of people found this is what I'm saying, there's some things in the showcase that I was a bit like, really? Like, there was a lot of advertisements for Porsche and like these watches that I know nothing about. I've never heard of them, but yeah, I'm guessing they're expensive watches. And there was a lot of advertisements for these things, and it kind of cheapened it a little bit, and a lot of people share the same sentiments as me. It cheapened it a little bit. Like it was like when you go to watch a film and there's just so much product placement in the film, a bit like that Power Rangers film that came out. There was literally like Krispy Kreme's product placement just littered throughout that film, and I feel like, yeah, this is definitely like advertising Porsche and these watches and whatever else they're advertising in there. Does the Porsche look cool? Yeah. Are we going to get to drive it? I hope so. If you're going to introduce a cool fucking Porsche like into the game, I would like to actually drive it, even if it's just for like these very linear segments of the game. I'd still like to be able to like drive this thing. I am a car enthusiast, I'm a car lover, so I think it's cool that Leon's driving a Porsche. Like, it's awesome, but at the same time, we didn't really need to go too deep into it, and there was a lot of sort of parts of the showcase that were dedicated to these dudes and these women talking about flipping Porsche and like these watches, and I was like, okay, boring, like move on. So yeah, I will say there's a little bit too much product placement in this showcase, but I understand it. Obviously, they made deals with Porsche and this watch company, and yeah, they kind of have to advertise them and show them off and whatnot, and I get it, but it's just a bit cheap. That's what it felt like. It was a bit cheap. But it was only for the middle part of the showcase, and then we moved on to sort of the last trailer we're going to get up until release. Before we go into the last trailer, actually, I did need to say something, and that's that the weapon skins and the costumes for the characters, they kind of suck. Like, they're a little bit lame. Like, I don't really want to dress Grace up as Demetriscu, and and the skin for the Requiem, it was just it was alright. Yeah, and then Leon's kind of whatever costume that was just a bit mid. Do you know what I mean? We're going from him having like a gangster costume with a Tommy gun to just like he looks like he stepped out of Persona. So yeah, they were a bit lame. I wasn't really feeling the stuff that you get the deluxe edition, and obviously the special edition, the ultimate edition is going to be like fucking expensive. So, and my wallet can't take that, unfortunately. For me, it's going to be base game, and I'm going to be happy with just the base game. And I'm normally like that anyway. I think the only one that I recently saw that I wouldn't mind getting was the deluxe edition of Soul Reaver 1 and 2. But at the same time, I just don't have that sort of money to be throwing around. And especially when games cost 60 to 70 quid now. It's just, yeah, it's getting a bit ridiculous. So that's one for you guys that can afford it, for, the ones that are able to afford it. But I would say think about it before you make that purchase. Don't go into it being like, oh, I'm a collector and yeah, I should collect this. The statues that they're releasing are actually being released separately. They're not being released with the special edition, as far as I know. In fact, actually, I'm getting that wrong. The special edition doesn't exist because they're not releasing one. It's just going to be the deluxe edition. So I got that wrong. Sorry about that. So yeah, if you want to get the statues, you'll be able to buy them separately, depending on how much they are, though. And look, we should never forget that they charged X amount of money. I can't remember how much it was, but it was a lot just for like a leather jacket, and I think they did that twice. I could be wrong in that. I could be getting that completely wrong. It's just because I didn't really spend too much time after I'd made videos on the special editions and stuff and deluxe editions, really thinking about it. So I can't remember, but I remember there was an unsightly amount of money for like Leon's leather jacket for one of the games. So yeah, just go into it knowing what you're going to get with the deluxe edition, and then decide if you want to make the purchase. Also, another thing I need to point out just before we move on is that Capcom have worked quite closely with Nvidia, and that's when we got that trailer, the Nvidia trailer. And a lot of people speculating as to whether this game will be open world or semi-open world. When you see Grace walking through the city streets and there's people walking by her and the rain effects and everything else like that, I think that's going to be a linear segment of the game. I think people are reading a little bit too much into it. I think if any area is going to be fairly open world, it's going to be Raccoon City, but the rest I think is going to be, you're still going to be kind of funneled down a path essentially, and it's going to be fairly linear. It's just going to be, I think, a lot like a typical Resident Evil game where you do have a semi-open environment to explore, but not to the extent of a Red Dead Redemption 2. Maybe that's going a bit too far, but like a typical open world game, Sleeping Dogs or Red Dead Redemption 1 or GTA 5. I think that it's going to be a bit more semi-open world and a bit smaller, a little bit like Control. So as we come towards the end of the showcase, The question's asked, what is Elpis? And Nakanishi goes on to say that, Leon has a secret in the game. Obviously, he's infected. We know this from the marks on his neck and sort of his hand and stuff that people have pointed out. And it's tied into Grace's mother, Alyssa. Now, I have a wild theory about that. And during the sort of some of the cutscene we get to see, we see Leon looking at the computer, seeing Grace, and kind of seeing a hand that's infected, and all this kind of information and details on Elpis. And he's kind of shaking his head and looking a little bit sort of remorseful. He's looking a bit down. Like, I have a feeling, and this is a very wild theory, but I have a feeling that maybe Leon was instrumental in Alyssa's death, and not, directly, but I think that he failed to protect her in some way, and they were sharing information with each other. He was her contact, she was his contact, and I think that something happened, and he wasn't there to protect her, and she ended up dying. Or Alyssa could have been the one that infects Leon, after she's mutated into that stalker enemy. There are two theories, definitely. Or it could just be straight down the middle that, they are known to each other, they were sharing information, but she died and he's looking sort of at her daughter and the fact that her blood's the key to everything. Damn, I got to rescue this girl. So it could be that, but I have a weird feeling that maybe there's going to be some guilt, with Leon, with his character this time, relating to Alyssa. I mean, Jill had some guilt in the fact that she tried to kill Chris and Sheva under the control of Wesker. That's sort of touched upon in Death Island, and it's expanded on. And then Chris has guilt because he's lost so many team members and teammates and friends when fighting BOWs. So maybe it's time for Leon to have a bit of guilt and kind of basically have fucked up along the way, essentially. So we'll have to see. But I think that the way they frame it, the way that Nakanishi talks about it, it might seem like, he failed to protect Alyssa and her daughter. I mean, she is in a hotel almost running away at one point. And maybe she was supposed to meet Leon and something just happened and he couldn't get to her in time. So that's my thoughts and everything, but it's speculation, it's a theory on my part. But yeah, we'll have to see. But the enthusiasm that Nakanishi shares for, there's so much I want to share with you, but you're going to have to play the game, and then I can finally talk about it when everybody has played the game and got through the story. I love that, because, they've kept it quite secret and quiet and behind closed doors, and they're still rolling with that, so that we're surprised, by the story and by the game when it comes time to play it. So yeah, I think that his enthusiasm, where he wants to talk to fans and stuff about the story and what happens in the game, I think that's a massive positive. Definitely, that's got me looking forward to just experiencing the story for myself. I will say one thing, that I agree with kind of a lot of people saying that Gideon isn't an antagonist in the same way that Spencer or Wesker or your kind of typical Resident Evil antagonists are. I think that he's someone who, because it says during that cutscene where Leon's looking at the computer screen, it says all for Elpis, or all for Project Elpis, and so it's showing me that Gideon means well. He wants to create something, I guess, that helps humanity, but at the same time he's willing to do whatever it takes in order to do that. And so that does make him an antagonist. It makes him a bad guy, but he has sort of good intentions. So yeah, I think that they could be expanding on the villain in this game a lot more than previous games have expanded on their villains, and making him just a more complex character, which I'm all for. So I think we're going to get a lot more complex characterization in this game and this story. And then we get the final trailer, I think, before release, and it shows off a lot of blood and guts, some visceral kills. We get a better look at the kitchen sort of zombie, and he's just fucking huge. He's he's big. Like, so I like that. I like that we get these fucking huge like zombies as well. There's something a little bit different. You know, it's kind of new, like just your regular zombies, but now they're like massive, bulky sons of bitches. And we get to see Grace being bitten by a zombie, but she's able to stab it in the eye with a knife. So we've still got that kind of that melee kill. You know, a lot like previous games. If you get caught, you can get out of it by stabbing them in the eye. I don't know whether the knives and stuff will be disposable, or you know, it'd be like a Resident Evil 4 situation where you just you have to fix them. I don't know, but yeah, all that classic stuff's making a return. And then obviously Leon's got his hatchet and similar thing. Like zombie attacks him, he can get out of that by just sticking that in the top of their heads. It's an extremely short trailer. It's probably the shortest trailer. It's, you know, but I think the thing about the trailer that I didn't, because everything else we kind of saw during the gameplay segments, like Leon's gameplay segments and Grace's gameplay segments, I think they were the better part of the showcase, definitely. And the trailer at the end was just showing you sort of like all these things just added together in a you know, B-roll. We do get to hear Grace say something like, what does she say? She says, "Oh, why did you kidnap me?" But it shows off her personality, where she's you know, she's quite a timid character. That's what Nakanishi has said. She's scared. She's the most scared protagonist that we've had in the series. And she says, "Why did you? Why did you kidnap me?" And then Gideon says, "I didn't kidnap you. I liberated you." Like, and that's kind of interesting. So in his head, he's like, "Look, I'm liberating you. You know, you're more important than you think you are, and there's something special about you." And it ties into the other trailers where he says, you know, you're like the chosen one, essentially. Like, you know, there's something special about you, basically. So we get a little kind of glimpse at Gideon's personality, but other than that, there's not much. And I think the most surprising thing was the enemy at the end, which is pretty much ripped from Resident Evil Village, with House Benevito and the big baby boss thing, right? And I don't mind the big baby boss, but I just think it was overhyped, and I think people just were a little too easily pleased by it. I will say that. Yeah, it's creepy. I didn't find it that scary. I found Jack Baker and Marguerite Baker to be a lot more scary than that thing in the Molded in Resident Evil 7. It was alright. Like, it was alright. Do you know what I mean? It kind of seemed like it belonged more in Silent Hill than Resident Evil, and you know, I think that it was like their version of the baby thing in PT. You know, it's like the stalker enemy, and it can just one hit kill you. And it was alright. I wasn't overly impressed by it. So this enemy that we get to see at the end of this trailer, right at the very end, it's similar to that, yeah. But now it talks. It says something like, "I won't forgive you," and then Grace is like, "What the fuck?" Do you know what I mean? And a lot of people saying that that's maybe like the Alyssa Ashcroft Hag stalker enemy, and that's her mutated more. But I think that's actually it's a separate enemy from what I can tell, because it just doesn't even resemble the Hag, basically. I think it's just something that's been taken from Village. I think it's, you know, it's an evolution of that baby boss from Village, and me being not the biggest fan of Village, it wasn't that impressive. I found the design to be a little bit just lackluster. It didn't, you know, I just wasn't feeling it that much. I guess when it smashes, you know, through the doorway and it fucking takes out the doorway and it's coming after, yeah, it's when it comes time to play it, it'll be a different experience. It'll probably be quite scary, but at the same time, I just think that the design was lazy. Basically, that's like I said. There's going to be a little bit of controversial stuff in this breakdown of the showcase, and that's probably the most controversial, because I'm sure there's loads of people that liked it. But this is me coming from seeing the amount of body horror mutations, you know, throughout the whole series, to this. And it's like you got Birkin and all his different forms, and then you have this giant baby thing that just, I don't know, it just wasn't that impressive, you know. Like I said, I would see that more in something like Silent Hill as opposed to Resident Evil. And like the Hag looks good, definitely. If it is like a mutation of Alyssa, which a lot of people think it is, I think it is as well. then I can get behind it, you know. But if it's just an enemy that hasn't got anything to do with Alyssa and it's just not tied to her, then I would say that wasn't the best enemy design in my opinion. It was okay. It was mid. But yeah, like I was more impressed by the zombies, you know, the different types of zombies and stuff like that. They impressed me quite a lot. And if the leaks are to be believed, I won't go into them here because there's other videos you can watch where I've talked about them. If they're to be believed, then we are going to get some reoccurring older bioweapons making a comeback, but slightly more mutated. So if that happens, yeah, I'll be a very happy boy. But as it is, other than the zombies, for now anyway, because I'm sure this will have tons and tons of enemy types in it. For now, the big baby thing was, it was alright, and I think that the hag is mid. It's alright. Like, it's cool. It's neither complete shit or amazing. It's sort of in the middle. Like, I don't mind it. I like it. It's cool. It'll probably be scary when it's chasing us around, you know. But yeah, Gideon. I find Gideon's design to be quite interesting, and the most interesting thing that I have seen, because like I said previously, it seems like he is actually welcomed by sort of the world, you know, and I think that he's this accomplished surgeon and doctor that does good things, and that's why he's able to sort of operate, do you know what I mean, within society, and people aren't like, I mean, they're probably weirded out by him, but they're also enamored with him as well for maybe some of the things that he's provided to the world. Who knows? Maybe he's helped TerraSave here and there. You know, I just don't know, but I could be completely way off. But I think that he's I think that he's quite a complex character, and we're going to get to see that during the story. But yeah, I really like his design. Like the split that's going down his chin and stuff was cool. I'm like, ooh, is that part of when he mutates? Does that split open? So, and what are the goggles for? Yeah, it's very interesting. And then obviously we get to see a picture of him when he was human, like in one of the trailers. So yeah, I think the zombies, Gideon, they're the cooler things in terms of like enemies and, you know, and monster designs. But we'll just have to see when the game's released, when we get to play it, which is going to be in February, and I'm looking forward to it. Like, I don't really day one a lot of games now, but that's definitely a day one. I've got to, you know. And the fact that Nakanishi is involved in it and he's the director, that makes me think, alright, it's in good hands. Whereas if it was like the team who created Resident Evil 8, you know, Village, I wouldn't be getting that day one. And if it was the same team behind the Resident Evil 3 remake, it wouldn't be a day one with that either. But because it's Nakanishi and his team, yeah, I will be picking it up day one. So let me know what you guys think about the showcase. Were you impressed? What score would you give it? I'd give it like a straight down the middle, just a 5 out of 10, to be honest. But yeah, I think if they'd have still kept it going, like kept it moving after the, you know, showing off the zombies and Leon gameplay, I think it would have been great. But I think there was a little bit too much product placement and stuff that I didn't really care for as a fan of Resident Evil, and that took up a lot of the middle sort of segment of the showcase, and then the end was like a really short sort of trailer. You know, they didn't show us anything we hadn't seen other than, like I said, this big baby boss thing. So 5 out of 10. There's been trailers previously that I think have done a better job and handled it better. And yeah, just speculate in the comment section. Like, do you think that Raccoon City is going to be a major part of the game, or just sort of more towards the end of the game? Like some people are saying. What did you think about the baby boss? And do you think that my theories about Gideon and Leon might be real, might come true? Just sound off in the comments. Let me know. But I'm going to end it there because we're over an hour. And hopefully maybe some more stuff will come out in the meantime, just before the game releases. I doubt it, but yeah, anything that does come out about it, I will cover it over on my channel. So once again, I've been System Check 66. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll catch you again soon. Peace.